If you have aspirations to become a founder and you're still working on your normal job, today I want to talk about a few things that I would recommend that you start doing now so that you can hit the ground running when you eventually make that leap. If I'd done these things before I'd started this business, we would have had probably 3 months head start on what we actually ended up having. First recommendation is that you start building your LinkedIn network actively. When I first started, I'd basically only been accepting invitation requests from my colleagues or from occasionally recruiters. I wish that I just sort of got into a new job, immediately connected with everybody that I met, and started to build a really strong network of people that know me. And certainly if you're going to networking events or you're going to conferences, make sure you're connecting with people actively. It feels a little bit awkward at first, but once you get into the flow and once you understand the value that having a network has, it can really help to accelerate the process in those early stages of a company. Because honestly, the hardest thing when you're just trying to test out an idea is finding people to talk to about it, and being able to do that through LinkedIn from people that you've met in the past or just people you've connected with is really, really valuable. The next thing I'd recommend is that you pick up a couple of books. The first is The Mum Test, and the second is Obviously Awesome. Both of these books are extremely popular, but I think for a founder, they are almost required reading. The Mum Test is really helpful for understanding how you should ask questions and really delve into people's problems to identify potential business ideas and solutions. Obviously Awesome is more focused towards positioning, and positioning is really important because what you'll find when you first start looking into business ideas is that there is almost nothing new under the sun. So you're probably going to be entering a market which has competitors. And initially we started out just sort of, our position was what we do, which is interactive product demos. And over time, we sort of shifted that towards small marketing teams or solo marketers within SaaS companies who are looking for an interactive product demo tool and a company that can support them in using that tool. When you look at a competitive landscape, having a position is how you differentiate. The next thing I'd recommend is that you understand the pros and the cons of different funding models. Whether you're going to side hustle it, bootstrap it, or take external investment from VCs, institutional investors, angel investors, or just a family and friends round, actually understanding where you're going to get the funds from or how you're going to support yourself is really important because it changes the mentality of how you approach building your business. I'm a strong proponent of bootstrapping, at least to a certain point, but there are a lot of cons to bootstrapping, and you do need to be in a financial position that allows you to do that. Whereas side hustling, you're not able to provide the same level of focus and attention that you need to in order to build a successful SaaS company. But on the flip side, you are sort of able to support yourself and you don't have the mental pressure that bootstrapping has. When it comes to institutional investment or taking on external funding, we've been through that process before as well. It has its own pros and it has its own cons. Obviously, you have a lot more money to play with, but it does lead, or it can lead to misspending or overspending in channels or in roles that maybe you don't really need. It also takes a lot of attention away from building your business. And in my experience, giving as much attention to your product and to your early customers as you possibly can is extremely valuable. So I really recommend considering all of your options when it comes to funding and figuring out what is feasible for the first sort of 2 years in order to get to a point where you feel stability and certainty about what your product is capable of, who you're positioning it to, and what you are capable of achieving through the channels that you've identified. The next thing I'd recommend is that you start sounding out who could potentially be a co-founder with you. In your sort of work life or in your personal life, I think work life is maybe slightly better because you've already got a working relationship with that person. Whereas when it comes to just straight up friends that you've sort of met in your normal day-to-day life, there is a little bit of a risk there because you've never actually worked with them. So you don't know how they approach their working or what their style of working is. Whereas colleagues, you sort of do have that opportunity to understand how they work and you know what their skill set is as well. So start sounding this out. I think People underrate how important it is to have a great co-founder. And I give absolute appreciation towards solo founders because that is a very, very tough job. Just even from the sort of mental health perspective, it's really, really hard to be a founder in the early days when you aren't necessarily seeing a whole lot of external traction. You're not getting the validation that you get from a traditional job or role. My final recommendation is to start joining communities from all walks of life while you have a job. It is so much harder to get into closed Slack communities or closed LinkedIn communities or even just like closed meetups when you are a founder because people don't want to be sold to, which is completely understood and understandable. I don't personally join communities with the intent of selling to them. I join with the intent of building a network. If you are trying to do that after you've already started a business, it can be quite tricky to convince the people who are gatekeeping that community that you're not joining to just go in there and immediately slap people with a pitch or try to promote your product. If people ask you because you're sort of joining weird communities that aren't really aligned with your job title, you can just say, oh, I'm interested in shifting into this type of work. A lot of communities are not very well run, or they are just completely dead, or they've been swamped by people who are there to pitch their product, and anybody who is actually of value has completely switched off. So join communities while you've got a job because you will find it a million times easier. So these are some of the tips that I have for aspirational founders, and hopefully you found it helpful to understand where you can sort of get started. It's really, really fun building a new business, but it's incredibly hard. Take my recommendations into account and start doing these things today, and hopefully it'll help you to achieve your goals in the future. And there's another plane. I live under a flight path. Every 5 minutes.